Before Thor was swinging hammers or Loki was causing chaos, there was absolutely nothing. No gods, no humans, not even a bored squirrel. Just Ginnunga Gap, a yawning cosmic void so empty it makes your Monday morning meetings look exciting. But from that, nothing came, well, everything. Welcome to the start of Norse mythology, where frost explodes, fire rages, and a giant is born from elemental awkwardness. Along the way, you'll meet gods who trade eyes for wisdom, a magical cow who licks beings into existence. We're serious. And a world-ending event called Ragnarok that makes superhero finales look like pillow fights. So grab your Viking helmet, smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and drop a comment about which myth you'd like us to dive into next. This journey through the Norse cosmos is just beginning. And trust us, it's going to get gloriously weird. Before gods, giants, or even cows licking stones into gods, there was a void. Ginnungagap. The name might sound like someone dropped a spoon and sneezed, but it's actually the birthplace of everything in Norse mythology. Imagine a cosmic no-man's land, sitting awkwardly between two extreme neighbors. To the north, Niflheim, a land so cold your goosebumps would get goosebumps. And to the south, Muspelheim, a realm so hot it could boil an ice giant in under 5 seconds. Nothing existed yet, but the icy mists from Niflheim began drifting south, while sparks from Muspelheim danced northward. And when they finally met in the middle, boom. Not an explosion exactly, but a sizzling, magical reaction. Something was brewing. Not coffee, unfortunately, but the first stirrings of life. The stage was set. The ingredients were ready. The recipe? 1 part fire, 1 part ice, and a pinch of cosmic drama. Get ready, because what happens next involves a sweaty giant you'll never forget. When the icy breath of Niflheim finally collided with the fiery sparks of Muspelheim in the middle of Ginnungagap, something extraordinary, and admittedly a bit sweaty, happened. From this chaotic blend of opposites emerged a being so massive, so primal, that the universe probably gasped. His name was Ymir, the very first frost giant. And no, he didn't ease into existence gently. He just appeared, fully formed, cranky, and leaking life. Seriously, as Ymir slept, sweat poured from his armpits, gross but important. And from that divine perspiration, other giants were born. Yes, in Norse mythology, a whole species began in a sweaty armpit. Ymir didn't ask to be a father. He didn't ask for anything. He simply existed, a grumpy grandpa of giants, sprawled out in the void, probably wondering why everything was so damp. But something else was about to arrive. Something with hooves, horns, and a tongue ready to change history. Spoiler, it's a cow. But more on her in the next part. While Ymir the giant was busy sweating out an entire population, something far more graceful and much less sticky entered the picture. Say hello to Audumla, the divine cow of legend. She didn't roar, stomp, or throw lightning. No, Audumla had a more elegant talent, licking rocks. Yes, the universe's first cow calmly wandered the icy plains of Ginnungagap and started licking salty blocks of frozen stone. Why? Because mythology. But here's the twist. After 3 days of licking, she uncovered something. Or someone. From the melting stone emerged Buri, the first of the gods and future grandfather of Odin. That's right. In the Norse creation story, a magical cow literally licked a god into existence. No epic battle, no booming prophecy, just one determined bovine, and a very salty wall. As Ymir snored nearby, oblivious, destiny was quietly unfurling behind him. And it tasted like mineral. Next time you see a cow staring at a wall, just remember, she might be sculpting a god. Buri, the rock-licked patriarch, didn't waste time. He had a son named Bor, and Bor married a giantess named Bestla, because in Norse mythology, nothing brings people together like being the only ones around. From this powerful pairing came 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. And if you're thinking, so now comes the hero's journey? Well, not quite. The trio took one look at Ymir, the sweaty, grumbling grandfather of giants, and decided he was simply too much. So naturally, they killed him. Yep, just straight-up giant slaying. But don't worry, it was all very mythologically justified. Ymir's body wasn't wasted. In fact, it became everything. But we'll get to that next. For now, just picture three divine brothers standing over a mountain-sized body, probably wondering where to start. Head first? Or maybe drain the blood first? Decisions, decisions. With Ymir's colossal body now lying motionless, Odin, Vili, and Ve rolled up their divine sleeves and got to work. Recycling was big in Norse mythology. Nothing went to waste. His blood, that became the oceans and seas. His bones, mountains. His teeth, rocks and cliffs. His hair turned into forests. And his skull was flipped into the sky, becoming the dome of the heavens. And his brain? Well, they tossed that into the air, and it became the clouds. That's right. Every time you look up and see a fluffy white puff floating above, just remember, it might be a piece of ancient giant brain drifting across the horizon. With Ymir thoroughly repurposed, the world as we know it began to take shape. A landscape crafted from the remains of one very unfortunate, but very useful frost giant. Next up, the tree that connects it all. And no, it's not just any tree. It's the world tree. Now that the world had mountains, oceans, forests, and enough clouds made from giant brain matter, it was time to bring everything together. Enter Yggdrasil, the world tree. Not just a regular tree, mind you. This tree was colossal, mythical, and cosmic-level impressive. Its roots stretched into the deepest realms, its trunk pierced through the middle world, and its branches reached high into the heavens. It didn't just hold the world together. It connected everything. Realms, beings, destinies, all tangled in its roots and branches like a divine Ethernet cable. And like any ancient mystical tree, it came with a cast of weird companions. A wise eagle on top, a gossipy squirrel running up and down, and a dragon nibbling the roots, because apparently drama is mandatory at all levels of the tree. Yggdrasil was more than scenery. It was the backbone of the universe. Coming up next, a closer look at the 9 realms it held together like a very dramatic family reunion. At the heart of Yggdrasil's mighty branches and roots lie the 9 realms, a cosmic layout so complicated, even Google Maps would give up. First, there's Asgard, home of the mighty Aesir gods and their high-drama family reunions. Then Midgard, that's us, the realm of humans, sandwiched in the middle, like the squishy center of a divine burger. Jotunheim is where the frost giants hang out and plot chilly revenge. Niflheim is freezing, foggy, and definitely not a tourist spot. Muspelheim, on the other hand, is pure fire and brimstone, basically one eternal barbecue. Vanaheim is the mysterious land of the Vanir gods, nature lovers with serious magical talent. Alfheim, elves, sparkles, and more cheekbones than logic. Svartalfheim is where the dwarves live, forging weapons and grumbling. And finally Helheim, the underworld of the not-so-honorable dead, ruled by a half-living, half-grim receptionist named Hel. Together, these realms form the chaotic, interconnected, and completely uninsurable universe of Norse mythology. And next, we'll zoom in on the VIP section, Asgard. Among the 9 realms, one stood out like the penthouse suite of the universe, Asgard. Home of the Aesir gods, it's where divine egos collided, weapons sparkled, and destinies were forged over mead and questionable decisions. Think of it as Mount Olympus meets a Viking metal concert. But the best part? The bridge. Connecting Asgard to the human world, Midgard, was none other than Bifrost, a rainbow bridge. Yes, the gods literally commuted on light beams. This wasn't some peaceful stroll either. Bifrost shimmered with magical energy and was guarded day and night by Heimdall, the all-seeing, all-hearing deity who made sure no frost giant crashed the divine party. Asgard wasn't just a celestial neighborhood. It was the throne room of the cosmos. And through that rainbow archway, the fates of gods and men would soon collide. Buckle up, the real divine drama is about to begin. So there it was. The grand cosmic setup was finally complete. Realms established, gods in their golden city, giants sulking in icy wastelands, and humans trying not to mess everything up too quickly. The world was officially open for business. But don't be fooled. This wasn't some peaceful utopia. The Norse cosmos came with built-in chaos. Monsters lurking in the shadows, destinies already written, and gods who were powerful, but far from perfect. There were rules, sure, but they were more like guidelines, bendable, breakable, and often ignored. The gods had their duties, the humans had their struggles, and somewhere, fate was sharpening its sword. Ragnarok, the end of days, wasn't a question of if, but when. But that's a story for later. For now, the universe had officially launched, full of drama, glory, and just enough doom to keep things interesting. Next time we dive into the gods themselves, starting with the one-eyed, wisdom-hungry All-Father. Every epic needs a central figure, a ruler, a schemer, a one-eyed philosopher warrior with a flair for dramatic ravens. Meet Odin, the All-Father. He's the CEO of Asgard, the king of the Aesir gods, and the kind of guy who'd trade an eyeball just to learn a secret. And that's exactly what he did. In his endless pursuit of wisdom, Odin plucked out his own eye and dropped it into Mimir's well, the cosmic library of knowledge, just to gain insight into the universe. Now he walks the halls of Valhalla with a sharp mind, a sharper spear, and two ravens named Hugin and Munin flying overhead to bring him daily updates, basically ancient Norse Twitter. He's a god of war, death, poetry, and knowledge, like four departments rolled into one overworked manager. With Odin at the helm, you can bet the cosmos will be both glorious and extremely complicated. And this is just the start of the divine cast. Behind every wise king stands a wiser queen, and in Asgard, that queen is Frigg. She's not just Odin's wife, she's the goddess of marriage, motherhood, and fate, which basically means she's running the divine household and holding the secrets of the cosmos. Frigg knows everything that's going to happen, the good, the bad, and the downright tragic. But here's the twist. She refuses to spoil anything. Yep, she's the original master of spoilers, who never spoils. Her calm, composed demeanor hides a mind sharper than Odin's spear, and even he doesn't dare question what she's keeping to herself. While others swing hammers or throw lightning, Frigg simply knows. Her power is subtle, quiet, and terrifying in its own way. She's the kind of deity who can smile politely while predicting your downfall, but don't worry, she'll still make sure your tunic is ironed. Frigg's presence reminds us that true power isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's wearing a regal gown, sipping tea, and silently deciding the fate of gods and mortals alike. If Asgard had a no-nonsense, smash-first, ask-questions-never department, Thor would be the director, CEO, and mascot. The son of Odin and arguably the loudest thunderclap in the cosmos, Thor isn't just a god. He's a walking, hammer-swinging natural disaster. Armed with Mjolnir, a short-handled hammer that can level mountains and boomerang back like a loyal pet, Thor is the divine bodyguard of both gods and humans. His daily routine? Punch giants, drink barrels of mead, and occasionally get stuck in weird magical disguises for diplomacy missions. Spoiler, he hates those. Despite the brawn and booming voice, Thor has a kind heart, especially for Midgard, Earth, and its fragile little humans. But don't mistake kindness for weakness. Insult his mother or mess with his goats, and you'll be flattened faster than you can say Ragnarok. Thor may not win poetry contests like Bragi, but when trouble strikes, everyone in Asgard knows exactly what sound to listen for. Thunder, and a booming laugh. If Asgard ever had a Mr. Congeniality pageant, Baldur would win. Every year, unanimously. This god of light was not only radiant on the outside, but also the kind of nice that makes you suspicious. Beloved by gods, humans, animals, and even rocks. Yes, literally. Baldur was Asgard's golden boy. His only flaw? Being so perfect that fate couldn't resist ruining him. After a series of ominous dreams about his death, his mother Frigg panicked and made every object in the universe promise not to harm her precious son. Every object except mistletoe. Because obviously no one suspects the decorative holiday twig. Loki, being Loki, sniffed out this loophole and orchestrated a deadly prank involving Baldur's blind brother Hod and a perfectly aimed mistletoe dart. Spoiler alert, it worked. Baldur's fall shattered Asgard's optimism and planted the seeds of Ragnarok. In short, He was the sunshine before the storm, literally. Among the Aesir, if there was a medal for most hardcore handshake, Tyr would win hands down. Well, hand down, since he only has one. As the god of war and justice, Tyr wasn't just talk. When the gods needed to bind the monstrous wolf Fenrir, nobody dared approach. Except Tyr. Of course Fenrir wasn't stupid. He agreed to wear the magical chains only if someone would put their hand in his mouth as a trust deposit. Everyone else suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Tyr? He calmly held out his hand like he was offering a cookie. When Fenrir realized he'd been tricked, he bit down, and Tyr didn't even flinch. Talk about commitment to the cause. From then on, Tyr became a symbol of true courage and sacrifice. While other gods relied on magical hammers or prophetic ravens, Tyr only needed one arm and an iron will. If you're ever asked to make a tough choice, remember Tyr. And maybe also remember to keep both hands if you can. If Asgard had a security system, Heimdall would be the high-tech motion detector, alarm siren, and bouncer, all rolled into one divine figure. Posted at the end of the shimmering Bifrost Bridge, Heimdall didn't blink, didn't nap, didn't even scroll through social media. Not that he had any. With hearing so sharp he could detect grass growing, and eyesight so keen he could spot a sneaky giant miles away, Heimdall was Asgard's ever-watchful sentinel. His golden teeth weren't just for show, they sparkled with divine authority. But his real claim to fame? The Gjallarhorn, a majestic horn he'd only blow in the event of Ragnarok. And when that day comes, trust Heimdall to wake up not just Asgard, but probably half the galaxy. Some say he was born with armor, others say he was just that vigilant since day one. Either way, if you're planning an uninvited trip to Asgard, you'd better bring snacks for Heimdall, because he's already seen you coming 3 weeks ago. While most gods wield hammers, swords, or at least a big scary stare, Idun carried something far more powerful: apples. But not just any apples. These were golden, glowing, magical fruits that granted immortality. Without her, the gods would age faster than a forgotten yogurt in the back of the fridge. Idun took her job seriously, guarding her fruit stash like a divine nutritionist with a top-secret smoothie recipe. The gods visited her regularly, not for advice or emotional support, but to get their literal daily dose of eternity. However, there was one minor problem. Idun was terribly trusting, and that would eventually lead to, well, let's just say a brief god-aging crisis involving Loki. Shocking, I know. But until that chaos erupted, Idun was the quiet, sweet-hearted MVP of Asgard, keeping the gods young, radiant, and Ragnarok-free, at least temporarily. If the gods ever held a poetry slam in Asgard, Bragi would win, every time. With a beard so long it probably had its own zip code, Bragi was the god of poetry and music. Married to Idun, yes, the Apple Lady, Bragi wasn't known for swinging weapons or fighting frost giants. His weapon was words. Beautiful, flowing, sometimes suspiciously too polished words. He could charm anyone with a well-timed rhyme or a perfectly recited saga. His voice? Velvet dipped in honey and sprinkled with wisdom. While other gods charged into battle, Bragi was usually nearby, composing an epic about it, preferably in iambic pentameter. Though he wasn't the loudest or flashiest, Bragi played an essential role in preserving the gods' stories and glories, turning even their failures into poetic triumphs. In a world full of shouting warriors and thundering hammers, he was the quiet rhythm keeping the myth alive. If you ever had a family argument and wished for a divine mediator, Forseti would be your guy. The son of Balder and Nanna, Forseti inherited his father's kindness and added a sprinkle of courtroom drama. He didn't carry a sword, a hammer, or even a poetic harp. His weapon was logic, fairness, and the power of a calm voice. While the other gods solved disputes with lightning or wolves, Forseti solved them with meetings. But surprisingly, his method worked. His hall, Glitnir, literally sparkled with silver and gold. And that was just the decor. His wisdom was the real treasure. Even the rowdiest gods couldn't stay mad once Forseti raised an eyebrow and offered them tea and a binding agreement. In a world built on war and chaos, Forseti was the reminder that sometimes talking things out, with some divine persuasion, could prevent Ragnarok, or at least delay it until after lunch. At the very peak of Asgard, where the air is thin and the view is unmatched, sits Hlidskjalf, Odin's ultimate throne. It's not just any fancy chair. It's the divine equivalent of Google Earth combined with a gossip column. From this seat, Odin could see all 9 realms, spy on his enemies, check up on his ravens, and probably even catch Thor sneaking a second breakfast. Meetings held here were no joke. This was where the gods gathered when things got really serious. Imagine a family dinner table, except your dad is the god of war, your uncle is a trickster shapeshifter, and your cousin keeps bringing lightning to the conversation. With Odin seated above all, stroking his beard in deep thought, or maybe pretending to, Hlidskjalf symbolized divine oversight, cosmic awareness, and the place where all secrets eventually came to light. Of course, Loki was rarely invited, for good reason. While the Aesir were busy with wars and thunderbolts, another divine squad was quietly thriving in nature's embrace. The Vanir. Think less battle armor and ravens, and more lush meadows and fertility festivals. The Vanir gods represented abundance, peace, prosperity, and, let's just say it, really great crops. Their powers were rooted in natural forces like wind, sea, fertility, and magic that helps things grow, in every sense. Worshipped especially in coastal regions, the Vanir weren't just tree-hugging pacifists. They had serious mystical clout and a more relaxed, sun-kissed lifestyle that made the Aesir look like grumpy workaholics. From bountiful fields to gentle rains, these deities kept the world blooming while others swung hammers and made speeches. But don't be fooled. Just because they're associated with peace doesn't mean they couldn't throw down. As you'll soon see, even gods of sunshine can get seriously stormy when provoked. Meet Njord, the chillest sea god you'll ever hear about. While the Aesir were busy hurling hammers and the Vanir tended crops, Njord controlled the tides and breezes like a weathered sailor with a divine fishing rod. With a beard salted by centuries of sea spray and a wardrobe made entirely of nautical chic, he was beloved by seafarers and traders across Scandinavia. Want smooth sailing? Pray to Njord. Want your fish market to boom? Njord's your guy. He wasn't flashy, but he was practical, the kind of deity who probably knew how to tie 400 types of knots and never got seasick. As the father of Freyr and Freya, he also had serious family legacy points, and while he did end up in Asgard after the Great Truce, Njord always kept a part of his heart, and his sandals, by the shore. If agriculture had a rock star, it'd be Freyr. This radiant Vanir deity wasn't just the god of sunshine and prosperity. He practically invented good harvests. Freyr had a unique ride, a golden-bristled boar named Gullinbursti, who glowed like a walking sunrise and could outrun any horse. Yes, even magical ones. Farmers adored Freyr, and even the driest fields perked up when he passed by. He was handsome, generous, and constantly radiated good vibes only. His presence brought fertility to land, peace to hearts, and a suspicious abundance of squealing pigs. When he arrived in Asgard after the truce, even the Aesir had to admit, the guy had style and crops. Let's just say if Freyr had a dating profile, it would read, loves sunshine, owns glowing boar, brings abundance wherever he goes. If Norse mythology had a diva, it would undoubtedly be Freya. She's the goddess of love, beauty, war, and magic, and somehow rocks all 4 effortlessly. Dressed in shimmering robes and adorned with a necklace so valuable it could fund a small kingdom, Freya doesn't walk, she glides. Her chariot? Not boring horses, but 2 massive cats, fluffy yet fierce, purring and growling at the same time. Don't let the charm fool you. Freya could lead warriors into battle just as easily as she could enchant a room with a single wink. She brought the mighty art of Satyr to the Aesir, a magic so powerful even Odin had to sit down and take notes. A goddess of contradictions, soft and deadly, loving and vengeful, Freya is proof that you don't need armor to be the most dangerous one on the battlefield. Everything was going smoothly, Vanir gods spreading peace, fertility, and the occasional sparkling harvest, until someone sneezed at Aesir's rigid traditions. Apparently, the Vanir had a more chill approach to rituals and power sharing, while the Aesir believed in rules, and even more rules. And just like that, a divine misunderstanding escalated into an all-out cosmic brawl. Flaming spears flew, sacred halls shook, and Odin probably lost a few more ravens to stress. It wasn't your average war. It was gods versus gods, with magic explosions and philosophical insults hurled like weapons. The battlefield was less about territory and more about pride, honor, and who had the better family tree. Spoiler, both sides claimed victory at least once per day. Eventually, even the gods got tired of fighting and cleaning up the celestial mess. But this war was more than just drama. It set the stage for an unexpected truce, a cultural merger that would change the mythos forever. After what felt like centuries of magical brawling, the gods finally reached that sacred moment of every divine disagreement. The awkward truce. No one really remembered who started it, or who actually won, but everyone agreed it was time to stop accidentally vaporizing each other. To seal the deal, both sides did what any ancient superpower would do: exchange hostages. But instead of gloomy prisoners, Vanir sent their best and brightest: Njord, Freyr, and Freya. The Aesir, eyes wide with curiosity, welcomed them like guests at a very formal, very sparkly family reunion. Odin may have raised an eyebrow, or what was left of it, but even he couldn't ignore the political brilliance of the move. It wasn't just diplomacy, it was a divine talent exchange program. Freyr brought sunshine and harvests, Freya brought magic and chaos, and Njord brought a calming sea breeze, and possibly some fish. Thus began the golden age of shared power, awkward small talk, and the first divine attempts at cross-cultural understanding. To everyone's surprise, the three newcomers from Vanir didn't just blend in, they became instant favorites. Njord, with his calming seaside presence and no-nonsense parenting style, quickly earned the respect of even the grumpiest Aesir elders. His idea of meditation involved listening to waves and eating grilled fish. How very zen. Freyr, on the other hand, brought the sunshine, literally. Wherever he went, crops flourished, birds chirped, and even Odin's ravens seemed a bit more cheerful. As for Freya, well, let's just say Asgard had never seen such a perfect combination of beauty, mystery, and sheer magical firepower. Within weeks, the trio wasn't just tolerated. They were sitting at the big table in the divine boardroom. Odin, ever the pragmatist, nodded approvingly. After all, nothing says peace like seasonal abundance, smooth sailing, and a goddess who can outglare Loki. The Vanir weren't guests anymore. They were part of the team, and Asgard for once felt just a little more harmonious. Well, almost. While Freyr was busy charming fields into blooming and Njord was debating fishing rights with Thor, Freya had something far more mysterious to offer: cider. This wasn't your average spellbook stuff. Cider was an art, equal parts prophecy, mind-bending illusion, and a dash of chaos sprinkled in for good measure. The Aesir, proud and battle-hardened, initially scoffed at this Vanir magic. Odin, ever curious, volunteered to learn. Big mistake, or big transformation depending on how you see it. Under Freya's watchful gaze, the Allfather found himself tangled in a web of visions, premonitions, and something that may or may not have been a goose. Soon, others followed, secretly taking satyr lessons while pretending they were just borrowing scrolls. Freya, of course, didn't mind. She knew the future anyway. With satyr weaving its way into Asgard's halls, the line between brute force and subtle power began to blur. Freya had not only introduced a new magic, she had changed the rules of the game. And Loki? Let's just say he now had serious competition in the chaos department. After the dust of war settled, the Aesir and Vanir found themselves at a peculiar crossroads. They weren't just frenemies anymore, they were now roommates. Sure, they had shaken hands, shared rituals, and even swapped a few recipes. Cedar stew, anyone? But deep down, they remained very different creatures. The Aesir thrived on order, strategy, and flashy displays of power. Think Odin's speeches or Thor's hammer-smashing entrances. The Vanir, on the other hand, preferred a good harvest, gentle weather, and peace talks over battle cries. Still, they tried to make it work. Odin would occasionally meditate in a meadow, for 5 whole minutes, while Njord diplomatically nodded through Thor's endless tales of glory. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Over time, their blend of warlike wisdom and earthy calm gave Asgard a new flavor, one with fewer shouting matches and more magical cats lounging on golden couches. And though their origins diverged, both tribes realized that the real magic was learning to live with someone whose playlist you might never understand. In the aftermath of divine chaos and magically passive-aggressive negotiations, something truly miraculous happened. The Aesir and Vanir decided to co-rule. That's right, Asgard went full coalition government, complete with joint feasts, shared responsibilities, and the occasional disagreement over seating charts. But somehow it worked. The Aesir brought their structured might and thirst for glory. The Vanir offered wisdom of the earth, rain, crops, and a surprising talent for calming Thor when he misplaced his hammer. Together, they forged a society that balanced war and peace, thunder and sunshine, prophecy and planning. Even Loki had to admit, if only begrudgingly, that the vibe was more interesting this way. It wasn't about who won or lost, but how they learned to live with, and even admire, their former enemies. The unity of the two clans became a foundational tale in Norse myth, a reminder that even gods occasionally realize that smashing everything isn't always the answer. Sometimes the best way to shape the cosmos is by sharing the throne. Meet Loki, son of a giant adopted brother of Odin and Asgard's most unpredictable houseguest. While most gods came with a resume full of thunder or fertility, Loki's only qualifications were charm, chaos, and a dazzling smirk that spelled trouble. Odin, in one of his more questionable decisions, took a liking to this shape-shifting trickster and welcomed him into the divine squad. Loki wasn't exactly a team player, but he had a knack for turning disasters into slightly less embarrassing disasters. One moment he was helping Thor recover a stolen hammer, the next he was turning into a mare and coming back pregnant. Don't ask. Though never truly trusted, Loki was always tolerated, like that friend who brings fireworks to a dinner party. His presence in Asgard was both a blessing and a walking time bomb. And as we'll soon see, when Loki got bored, the gods got nervous. Loki wasn't just the god of mischief. He was the full-time CEO of Chaos Inc. Need someone to turn into a salmon to avoid capture? Loki. Need someone to impersonate an old lady to mock the gods? Loki. He once even transformed into a mare to distract a giant stallion, and came back with a magical foal. No comment. Despite his antics, Loki had a strange knack for being oddly useful, usually right after causing the problem in the first place. The gods, annoyed but desperate, kept forgiving him like someone who ruins every party, but also brings the best snacks. From fooling dwarves into forging divine treasures, to sneaking into enemy camps, using only a fox disguise and a smug attitude, Loki's talent for mischief often bailed the gods out of disaster. But deep down, no one ever truly knew where his loyalty lay, except that it was probably with himself, and maybe his reflection. Believe it or not, some of the most iconic treasures of the gods were thanks to Loki. Yes, the same Loki who once turned into a horse. After one of his many pranks went too far, again, the gods threatened to punish him unless he made it right. So in classic Loki fashion, he convinced the dwarves, master craftsmen with questionable tempers, to forge magnificent gifts. From their forges came Mjolnir, Thor's hammer that could flatten mountains and then boomerang back. Sif's new golden hair, shinier than any shampoo ad, and Draupnir, a gold ring that multiplied itself because apparently one ring isn't enough. Of course, Loki had to stir the pot. He bet his head on the dwarves failing. They didn't, and he nearly lost his head, literally. But thanks to a technicality, and Loki's fast talking, he kept it attached, though his lips got sewn shut. Temporarily, the moral? Loki causes chaos, but he also brings the loot. Among all of Loki's mischiefs, one prank crossed the line, from haha to oh no. That was when he orchestrated the death of Balder, Odin's beloved son. Balder, the golden boy of the gods, was so perfect that everything in existence promised not to harm him. Everything except mistletoe. Loki, never one to let a loophole go unexploited, carved a dart from that very plant. But he didn't throw it himself. He handed it to Balder's blind brother, Hoder, and casually helped him aim. The result? Bullseye. Balder fell dead, and the laughter died with him. Odin was devastated, the gods horrified, and Loki? He pretended to be shocked. Badly. This betrayal wasn't just another mischief. It was the beginning of the end. From this moment, the countdown to Ragnarok began ticking, and Loki's days in Asgard were numbered. After Balder's untimely demise, Asgard went into full gods gone wild mode, but not in a fun way. The air grew colder, Odin sulked harder than ever, and Loki? He vanished faster than a squirrel spotting Thor's hammer. Realizing he'd crossed the ultimate line, Loki turned fugitive. But this was no ordinary game of hide-and-seek. Using his shape-shifting talents, he disguised himself as everything from a fish to an old lady selling runes. The gods launched an all-out manhunt, with Heimdall scanning every horizon, and Thor smashing random boulders just in case Loki was hiding underneath one. The tension was thick enough to cut with a sword. It was no longer about mischief. It was about betrayal, justice, and sweet divine revenge. Loki knew it was only a matter of time before his past caught up. And when gods come knocking, they don't do it gently. Every thunderclap felt like a countdown, echoing through the 9 realms. Tick-tock, Loki, tick-tock. After the gods finally cornered Loki, possibly disguised as a salmon in a shallow river, they wasted no time. This wasn't a slap on the wrist kind of punishment. Oh no, they tied him up with the entrails of his own son. Yes, entrails. The gods apparently skipped the part where therapy might help. To make matters worse, because of course it could get worse, they hung a venomous snake above his head. This wasn't for decoration. The snake constantly dripped poison onto Loki's face. Every single drop. His wife Sigyn, loyal to the very end, stayed by his side with a bowl to catch the venom. But every time she turned to empty it, drip, pain, drip, agony, drip. Screaming fits loud enough to rattle Midgard. Loki's suffering became a thunderous soundtrack echoing through the realms, a daily reminder that divine mischief might be fun, but divine vengeance, that's next-level hardcore. And thus, Loki remained bound, brooding and sizzling until the day of Ragnarok would come knocking. As if Loki hadn't caused enough drama, he also happened to be the proud father of the most nightmare-inducing children in all of Norse mythology. First, there's Hel, half beautiful, half dead, with the personality of a funeral home receptionist. Then we have Fenrir, a wolf pup the size of a barn by age 5, with a bite big enough to give Odin night terrors. And finally, Jörmungandr, a world-spanning sea serpent who thought wrapping himself around Midgard was the peak of cozy living. These weren't your average mischievous kids. No school could handle them. No daycare would dare. Loki's offspring were so intense that the gods didn't just worry, they held emergency meetings. Odin probably had to update his parenting manual to include, if your blood brother spawns apocalyptic creatures, consider a stern talking to, or banishment. In short, while Loki was tied up getting venom dripped on his face, his legacy slithered, growled, and slumped its way into prophecies of doom. Family goals? Maybe not. Among Loki's peculiar children, Hel was definitely the most balanced. And by balanced, we mean her face was literally split down the middle, one side alive and youthful, the other side looking like it just crawled out of a crypt. Hel wasn't your typical underworld ruler with fire and brimstone. No, she ruled Helheim, a gloomy, gray, and mildly depressing realm where the souls of those who died unheroic deaths ended up. No glory, no banquet halls, just a cold welcome and a "you tried" sticker. Unlike her father, Hel wasn't into chaos for fun. She ran her realm with the professionalism of a DMV clerk who's seen it all. The gods, understandably, weren't thrilled about this arrangement. But no one dared challenge her either, partly because she was technically family, partly because she gave off strong "don't mess with me" vibes. So while Valhalla got the partygoers, Helheim got everyone else, and Hel made sure they stayed put. Among Loki's monster kids, Fenrir the giant wolf was a bit extra. Born fluffy but growing like a god-eating weed, Fenrir soon became too big and too teethy for comfort. The gods, always masters of subtlety, decided the best solution was to chain him up. For safety, of course. But you can't just tie down a magical mega-wolf with regular rope, so they commissioned the dwarves to forge Gleipnir, a ribbon made from 6 completely ridiculous ingredients. The sound of a cat's footsteps, a woman's beard, the breath of fish, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, and bird spit. Don't ask how they got those. When they tricked Fenrir into testing the new leash, he demanded someone put a hand in his mouth as a sign of trust. Tyr, the god of war, bravely volunteered, and promptly became left-handed forever. Fenrir thrashed, but Gleipnir held firm, a magical ribbon that looked like silk but bound like doom. If Norse mythology were a video game, Jormungandr would definitely be the end boss. This massive sea serpent, another delightful child of Loki, didn't just splash around in puddles. He wrapped himself around the entire world like a cosmic noodle. As he grew, so did the tension between him and Thor, the god of thunder. Their beef wasn't your average sibling rivalry. It was more like, I'll end the world, and you'll end me kind of drama. Legend has it, they're destined to duke it out during Ragnarok in a fight so epic, it makes Hollywood look like kindergarten theater. Thor will slay Jormungandr, but the serpent's poison will finish Thor off shortly after. A truly toxic relationship. Literally. But until that fateful day, Jormungandr just lurks beneath the waves, quietly practicing his evil stare and waiting for the final showdown, like a patient but extremely venomous noodle. Before you imagine heaven as a quiet place with harps and clouds, let me introduce you to the Valkyries, Norse mythology's airborne warrior ladies with attitude. These fierce armor-clad women ride flying horses across the battlefield, scouting for the bravest and deadest warriors to take home to Valhalla. Picture it, arrows whizzing, swords clashing, and suddenly, zoom, a Valkyrie swoops in like a magical Uber for the afterlife. But she doesn't pick just anyone. Only those who fought like legends get the golden ticket. Once chosen, the warrior is taken to Odin's Great Hall, where the mead flows freely, and eternal battle practice is on the daily schedule. Each Valkyrie is a symbol of divine power, elegance, and terrifying efficiency. Basically, if Xena and a fighter jet had a baby. So next time you hear galloping hooves in the clouds, duck and wave, you might be getting recruited for an eternal afterparty in Valhalla. If you ever thought zombies were a modern horror invention, think again. Meet the Draugr, the undead of Norse mythology, who didn't just rise from the grave to groan and moan. No, these guys had a to-do list. First, guard the treasure buried with them. Second, terrorize anyone who dared disturb their eternal nap. And third, grow in size because, apparently, death isn't a diet. Draugr could shapeshift, pass through walls, and had a smell that could knock out a goat. In the Viking world, a peaceful death and proper burial rituals were taken very seriously, because if not, the deceased might come back with a grudge and a glowing pair of eyes. Not exactly your friendly neighborhood ghost. If you stumbled across a barrow mound while wandering in the misty hills of Scandinavia, you better hope it wasn't Draugr's nap time, because they're not fans of uninvited guests. While the Draugr might make you lose sleep, the elves and dwarves might just make you jealous. Let's start with the elves, or light elves, to be precise. Think tall, radiant beings who look like they walked out of a shampoo commercial and into a magic forest. They mastered art, beauty, and sorcery, basically the influencers of the 9 realms. Now flip the coin and meet the dwarves, short, grumpy, cave-dwelling geniuses who made legendary items like Thor's hammer Mjolnir, Odin's spear Gungnir, and that suspicious golden wig Loki needed after a haircut incident. Despite their contrasting appearances, both races were essential in shaping the mythic world. While elves dazzled with their elegance, dwarves wowed with their blacksmithing. And let's be honest, who needs good looks when you forge weapons for gods? Moral of the story, whether you're glowing with grace or covered in soot, you still might end up in the lore books. Just when you thought Norse mythology couldn't get any weirder, boom, here comes an eight-legged horse. Sleipnir, the fastest steed in all the realms, wasn't born in a stable but from Loki, after he transformed into a mare and flirted with a stallion. Yes, you heard that right. Odin's favorite horse is technically Loki's son. Sleipnir has 8 legs, not because he's greedy for hooves, but because it allows him to gallop between worlds like a Norse Uber XL. He can ride through air, over water, and even into the underworld. No traffic, no tolls, just 8-legged efficiency. Despite his strange origins, Sleipnir is majestic, powerful, and oddly elegant for a creature with double the usual leg count. It's the mythological equivalent of a luxury vehicle and a family drama rolled into one. If you think your family tree is complicated, try explaining to your dad that you're also his best friend's horse. While Sleipnir galloped across realms with 8 legs, Odin had another secret weapon flying above. Hugin and Munin, his 2 ravens. But these weren't ordinary birds, they were the divine equivalent of Google Maps and a gossip blog combined. Every day, Hugin, thought, and Munin, memory, flew across the 9 realms, watching, listening, eavesdropping like pros, then swooping back to whisper everything into Odin's one ear. Imagine running a kingdom with your own pair of airborne intelligence officers. No wonder Odin always looked like he knew everything. The only catch? He secretly feared they might not return, because even gods have trust issues. Whether it was spying on giants or checking if humans remembered to sacrifice properly, these ravens kept Odin updated better than any group chat. So next time you see a raven staring at you, maybe don't wave. He's probably already sent your weird dance moves straight to Valhalla. After flying with Odin's ravens, let's descend straight into the underworld. Welcome to Helheim, the realm of the dead. But beware, this place has a guard dog, and no, it's not a cute puppy. Meet Garmr, the ferocious beast chained at the gates of Helheim. Think of him as the hellhound version of Cerberus, if Cerberus skipped leg day and went straight to fang day. Garmr doesn't bark. He growls like a thunderstorm and drools lava. According to prophecy, Garmr won't stay chained forever. When Ragnarok arrives, he breaks loose and faces off against Tyr, the god of war and honor, in a showdown so intense it makes action movies look like bedtime stories. Spoiler alert, neither walks away. So next time someone tells you dogs are man's best friend, remember, some just want to end the world with slobber. After battling hellhounds and dodging underworld gates, let's now take a swim. Just kidding, don't. Because lurking beneath the waves is the Kraken, the nightmare of every Viking sailor. Though technically more famous in later legends, the Kraken has tentacles large enough to hug a ship. To death. Imagine peacefully sailing through misty fjords when suddenly the ocean bubbles, the sky darkens, and bam! Giant squid arms slap your boat like it owes them rent. In Norse-adjacent folklore, the Kraken was blamed for every lost ship, bad fishing day, or unexpected splash. Whether it's myth or very aggressive seafood, no sailor wanted to meet this creature on a Monday morning. So next time you throw a pebble into the sea, just remember, you might be ringing someone's doorbell, and that someone might have 8 arms and a bad attitude. If you think a world tree is just a fancy metaphor, think again. Yggdrasil, the cosmic ash tree in Norse mythology, is not only alive, it's multitasking. Its 3 massive roots stretch into 3 different realms. Asgard, land of the gods, Jotunheim, realm of giants, and Helheim, where the dead hang out. Each root has its own drama. One is watered by a holy well, another is gnawed by a cosmic squirrel's sworn enemy. Yes, that's a thing. And the third hangs over the land of the dead. Talk about uneven real estate value. The roots of Yggdrasil don't just anchor the universe, they also host all kinds of bizarre creatures, dragons, serpents, squirrels with attitude. Basically, it's a magical ecosystem that makes your neighborhood look boring. So the next time you trip over a tree root, be glad it's not leading to Helheim. Among all the gods, monsters, and magical squirrels in Norse mythology, the real bosses are 3 mysterious women sitting by the roots of Yggdrasil. Meet the Norns, Urd, the past, Verdandi, the present, and Skuld, the future. While everyone else is swinging hammers or casting spells, these ladies are calmly weaving destiny like it's just another Tuesday. They don't yell, they don't fight, but with a single thread, they can shape the life of gods and humans alike. Imagine them as cosmic project managers with divine knitting skills. Even Odin, the almighty one-eyed know-it-all, shows them respect, and probably a little fear. So next time something in your life goes wrong, instead of blaming bad luck, consider this. Maybe Erd was having a bad hair day, Verdandi sneezed, or Skuld tripped on her own spool. Fate, in the end, is a string, held tightly by three ladies who do not take refunds. To wrap up this whirlwind tour of magical beasts and mystical realms, let's take a moment to admire some of the most iconic objects in Norse mythology. First up, Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, capable of flattening giants, summoning lightning, and somehow always flying back like a loyal boomerang. Then there's Gleipnir, the silky ribbon made from the sound of a cat's footsteps, and other impossible ingredients, used to bind the monstrous wolf Fenrir. Yes, it's basically magical duct tape. And don't forget Draupnir, Odin's golden ring that multiplies itself every 9 nights, like the mythical version of a money printer. These aren't just props for divine cosplay. They represent deeper values: strength, wisdom, and abundance. So next time you lose your keys, just be glad you're not chasing a flying hammer, trying to wrestle a wolf, or counting golden rings in the dark. Once upon a thunderstorm, Thor woke up and his hammer Mjolnir was gone. Panic, of course. That hammer wasn't just a weapon. It was his personality. Turns out a giant named Thrym stole it and demanded Freya's hand in marriage in exchange. But Freya wasn't having it, and no one else wanted to marry a rock-hugging brute. So what's the plan? Obviously dress Thor in a wedding gown, slap a veil on him, and send him undercover as Freya. With Loki as his maid of honor, the god somehow pulled off the weirdest wedding crash in mythological history. Thrym was so excited he didn't even question why Freya was eating entire cows at dinner. The moment Mjolnir was placed on Thor's lap as a wedding gift. Boom, veil off, fists flying, giants flying harder. Moral of the story? Never steal a thunder god's hammer, especially if he's willing to wear heels to get it back. And just when you think Norse mythology couldn't get weirder, enter Loki, the god of mischief and chaos, doing what he does best, turning into a horse and accidentally becoming a mother. It all started when the gods hired a mysterious builder to construct a mighty wall around Asgard. The catch? The guy had a superpowered stallion named Svadilfari helping him. To prevent him from finishing on time and avoiding a bad deal, Loki transformed into a beautiful mare to distract the stallion. Spoiler alert, it worked. Too well. 9 months later, Loki returned, with an 8-legged foal named Sleipnir. Yep, the fastest horse in all the 9 realms was born from a prank gone too far. Odin, of course, was thrilled and took Sleipnir as his steed. Loki probably needed a long nap and some therapy. Lesson here? If you shapeshift for sabotage, be prepared to deal with magical child support. From comedy to catastrophe, Thor's next adventure takes a deadly serious turn. Enter Jormungandr, the world serpent so large it circles the entire earth and bites its own tail like a cosmic sushi roll. Thor and Jormungandr have a grudge match brewing for centuries. Prophecy says their final showdown will happen during Ragnarok. But before that, they had a little warm-up fight during a fishing trip. Yes, you heard that right. Thor once went fishing with a giant, used an ox's head as bait, and accidentally hooked the world serpent. The sea boiled, thunder cracked, and Jormungandr rose, angry, massive, and very much not in the mood. Thor raised Mjolnir, ready to end it then and there, but the giant panicked and cut the line. Talk about ruining the catch of a lifetime. Still, the prophecy remains. One day they'll meet again. And this time, no one's going home with just wet boots. Power? Odin had plenty. Wisdom? Well, that required a bit more sacrifice. In his endless pursuit of knowledge, Odin traveled to the Well of Mimir, an ancient spring guarded by the wise and not-so-generous Mimir. The price for a sip of this magical wisdom juice? 1 eyeball. No, not a metaphor. Odin literally plucked out his own eye and dropped it into the well like a very dramatic coin toss. Did it hurt? Probably. Was it worth it? Totally. He walked away smarter, deeper, and slightly less symmetrical. That's why he's always depicted with one eye. It's not a fashion statement, it's an academic scholarship. So the next time you complain about studying late into the night, just remember, at least you didn't have to trade your eyeball for enlightenment. Balder, the shining prince of Asgard, was loved by all. Literally everyone, and everything, swore never to harm him. Everything except mistletoe. Yep, the cute plant people now kiss under was the loophole. Loki, ever the troublemaker, found this out and handed a dart made of mistletoe to Balder's blind brother Hoder. Then he guided Hoder's hand to throw it. Boom! Balder, the radiant golden boy, dropped dead in front of the gods like a tragic plot twist. The gods were horrified. They begged Hel, queen of the underworld, to release him. She agreed, on one condition: if everything in the world wept for Balder. And everything did, except for one grumpy old giantess, who may or may not have been Loki in disguise. Result: Balder stayed in Helheim, and Ragnarok's countdown officially began. Moral of the story: never underestimate mistletoe, or Loki, with too much free time. Freyr, the handsome god of fertility and sunshine, saw the giantess Gerd and instantly fell head over sandals in love. Problem? She lived in Jotunheim, land of giants, and wasn't exactly swiping right on gods. So like any love-struck deity, Freyr gave away his magic sword, a blade that could fight on its own, just to win her hand. Romantic? Definitely. Smart? Not so much. He sent his servant Skirnir to woo her with some poetry and a sprinkle of magical threats. Eventually, she agreed, but the cost was steep, come Ragnarok, when Freyr had to face the fiery giant Surt. Guess what he didn't have? Yep, that very sword. Spoiler alert, love may conquer all, but not without a good weapon. Moral of the story? Don't trade your best gear for a date, especially if the apocalypse is on your calendar. Sigurd was no ordinary warrior. He was the chosen dragon slayer with a tragic destiny and surprisingly great hair. His target? Fafnir, a fearsome dragon who wasn't always so scaly. Once a greedy dwarf, Fafnir transformed into a dragon to guard a cursed treasure hoard so blinged out it would put modern influencers to shame. Sigurd, with the help of the wise dwarf Regan, who conveniently forgot to mention that Fafnir was his brother, forged a sword named Gram that could cut anything, even through family drama. After bravely stabbing Fafnir during a surprise attack, Sigurd accidentally tasted dragon blood. And boom, he suddenly understood the language of birds. Because why not? The birds, being the real MVPs, warned him that Regan planned to betray him. So naturally, Sigurd killed Regan too. Treasure 1, trust issues confirmed. Moral? If you're going to slay a dragon, maybe ask a few more questions first. Before superheroes and capes, there was Beowulf, the original monster puncher from the misty lands of Geatland. When King Hrothgar's grand mead hall was haunted nightly by a party-pooping creature named Grendel, no one dared fight back. Enter Beowulf, the human embodiment of leg day never skipped. With zero armor and full confidence, he faced Grendel barehanded. Why? Because real warriors don't need swords when they've got plot armor and bulging biceps. In a sweaty wrestling match of mythic proportions, Beowulf tore Grendel's arm clean off. Mic drop. Grendel fled crying to his mom, who by the way was no less terrifying. Naturally, Beowulf dove into a creepy swamp, swam to her underwater lair, and slayed her too. Because why stop at one nightmare when you can get the whole family? His legend, though often considered part of Anglo-Saxon lore, is soaked in that delicious northern flavor of myth, glory, and gloriously bad decisions. Once upon a wall-building time in Asgard, the gods decided they needed protection. Enter a mysterious builder with a simple offer. I'll build you a wall so strong, even Loki can't sneak through it. In return, the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freya. Casual. The gods hesitated, but Loki, ever the deal enthusiast, convinced them to accept, on the condition that the builder finishes in one season, using only his horse. Spoiler: the horse was no ordinary pony. It was a beast named Svadilfari, who hauled stones like a mythological forklift. The wall was going up fast. Too fast. The gods panicked, and guess who they blamed? Yep, Loki. As damage control, Loki transformed into a gorgeous mare, pranced around Svadilfari, and, well, let's just say, construction halted dramatically. The builder, revealed to be a giant, got a Mjolnir-powered eviction from Thor. The wall was unfinished, the gods were mad, and Loki came back pregnant, with an 8-legged horse. Typical day in Norse mythology. In the glorious halls of Asgard, the gods realized a terrible crisis. They were running out of beer. No mead, no feast. The solution? A giant brewing cauldron 3 miles deep, owned by a sea giant named Hymir. Naturally, Thor volunteered to get it, with Loki tagging along, because of course, Thor set sail to meet Hymir, who wasn't exactly the sharing type. To impress him, Thor went fishing and casually hooked the world serpent. Classic Thor. After nearly tearing the ocean apart, Thor let the serpent go. Bad PR if he started Ragnarok early. Back at Hymir's, Thor passed every ridiculous test the giant threw at him. Breaking goblets, hauling oxen, and being a walking testosterone tornado. Eventually, he simply picked up the cauldron and walked off with it, because apparently that's just a thing Thor can do. The gods threw a massive beer party. Loki got tipsy and insulted everyone, and peace was restored. Until the next mythical disaster. You might think Vikings only worshipped their gods in grand golden temples with lightning crackling overhead. Wrong. Their sacred spaces ranged from humble household altars to eerie forests that felt like Odin himself might be hiding behind a tree. Sure, there were a few proper temples, like at Uppsala, with golden statues and, let's say, very enthusiastic sacrifices. But most Norse folks made do with a carved wooden idol on the kitchen shelf, a goat roasted in honor of Thor in the backyard, or a rock circle under an old oak tree that doubled as a divine hotline. The divine didn't need marble columns. A sacred grove, a fire pit, and a few terrified chickens would do just fine. In short, Vikings worshipped wherever and however they could, as long as the gods were watching, and hopefully in a good mood. When it came to pleasing the gods, the Vikings didn't hold back. Forget scented candles and quiet prayers. These folks went full Viking. Offerings ranged from simple loaves of bread to the occasional unfortunate goat. And yes, sometimes even humans. Nothing says, "Please bless my crops," like tossing a well-dressed noble into a bog. Sacrifices were serious business, held during major festivals or moments of crisis, with everyone watching like it was a community theater performance, but with more blood and less Shakespeare. The idea was simple. Make the gods happy, or brace yourself for a year of rotten harvests and mysterious plagues. While some rituals were symbolic, pouring mead or tossing coins, others were, let's say, more interactive. Whether it was food, treasure, or that guy you never liked from the next village, the gods got their due. And if the skies cleared afterward, well, it worked, didn't it? Before printing presses and YouTube channels, Norse myths survived thanks to the oldest form of human communication: gossip, but poetic. Enter the Skalds, wandering Viking poets with epic beards and even more epic memory. These guys were the human USB sticks of the Viking world, carrying tales of gods, giants, betrayals, and heroic blunders across villages. Armed with a lyre and limitless dramatic flair, they'd recite sagas in smoky longhouses, their voices echoing between sips of mead and roars of laughter. Forget boring lectures. Skalds turned mythology into high-octane performances, mixing history with just enough exaggeration to keep the crowd hooked. And the best part? Each storyteller added their own twist. So by the 10th Skald, Thor might have wrestled a sea monster while juggling goats. It was chaotic, unreliable, and absolutely glorious. For Viking warriors, dying in battle wasn't the end. It was the audition for the ultimate afterlife gym, Valhalla. This glorious hall, run by Odin himself, wasn't some sleepy paradise with harps and clouds. No, Valhalla was where the bravest of the brave got to train non-stop for the end of the world, aka Ragnarok. Imagine waking up every morning, sword in hand, fighting fellow warriors to the temporary death, then laughing about it over endless mugs of mead in the evening. And the food? Roasted boar that regenerates every day, cooked by a magical chef who probably never sleeps. To get in, though, you had to impress the Valkyries, Odin's elite all-female warrior scouts, who'd swoop into battle like a glittery SWAT team and choose the most heroic fallen. So yes, dying gloriously wasn't just cool, it was a one-way ticket to an eternal warrior party with meat, mead, and mayhem. While Viking men were out raiding, farming, or accidentally summoning sea monsters, Viking women were quietly shaping the spiritual life of the community. Far from being mere spectators, women held sacred roles as storytellers, keepers of rituals, and even magical practitioners of Seder. These were not your average fortune tellers with crystal balls, but respected figures who could bend fate itself, with a dramatic flair, of course. In smoky longhouses, grandmothers would pass down myths with extra spice, while priestesses chanted in the forests, calling upon the gods with firm voices and zero patience for nonsense. Women were seen as vital bridges between the human and divine worlds. So next time someone tells you Vikings were all about beards and battle axes, remind them the real spiritual heavy lifting might have come from the lady in the corner, brewing tea and casually communing with Odin. Forget emojis. Vikings had runes. These mysterious angular letters weren't just for writing down grandma's soup recipe. Oh no, they were sacred tools, believed to carry the will of the gods themselves. Runes could be carved into stones, weapons, or even fingernails, for the especially dramatic. Want good harvest? Carve a rune into your plow, going to battle? Etch one on your sword and hope Odin's watching. Need to ward off nosy neighbors? There's a rune for that too. People believed runes could foretell the future, seal magical pacts, or grant divine protection. Rune masters weren't just scribes, they were part wizard, part artist, part therapist. And just like tattoos today, every rune had meaning, so you didn't want to walk around with accidentally summoned a troll etched on your shield. In short, runes were the Viking version of mystical Wi-Fi, always connected to the divine, with better signal in sacred groves. If Norse magic were a subscription service, Seder would be the premium plan with all the upgrades. Fate twisting, future peeking, and reality bending included. This mystical art, famously practiced by the goddess Freya, yes, the one with the cats, allowed its users to glimpse the future or even change it. Talk about early access. But using Seder wasn't all incense and dramatic chanting. The practitioner, often female but occasionally brave men like Odin himself, would enter a trance-like state, surrounded by chanting supporters. From there, the real magic began. Seeing visions, shifting destinies, and occasionally causing awkward family drama. While some folks used Seder to ensure a good harvest, others used it to check if their crush liked them back. Seriously. It was powerful, respected, and slightly feared. After all, anyone who can tweak your destiny with a few well-placed runes and some intense humming deserves a healthy amount of cautious admiration. Forget boring wall calendars. The Vikings lived by the sun, the moon, and a whole lot of feasting. Their religious life was deeply tied to the seasons. Winter solstice? Time for Yule. Bring out the boar, the beer, and maybe a small goat-shaped cookie. Spring? Let's bless the fields so they don't produce 3 carrots and a rock. Summer? Time to thank the gods for sunlight and not getting frostbite. Each season brought rituals, offerings, bonfires, and enthusiastic dancing that may or may not have been coordinated. These celebrations weren't just about food. They were spiritual, community-wide events that brought everyone together to honor the gods and beg them not to mess up the weather. Because if you've ever tried farming in a blizzard, you know why prayers mattered. The Norse year wasn't just 12 months. It was 12 opportunities to eat, drink, and politely bribe the gods with mead. If you walked into a Viking home and saw a hammer pendant, it wasn't because they were into construction work. That was Mjolnir, Thor's mighty hammer, worn as a charm, not a tool. Norse people didn't just worship their gods in temples. They wore their faith, literally. Beads shaped like wolves, brooches etched with runes, and sword hilts carved with Odin's one-eyed glare were more than just accessories. They were spiritual armor. You might pray with a rune stone, then tuck it into your belt pouch next to your lunch. Some warriors even believed their swords fought better if they were engraved with symbols. Spoiler: the sword still needed a strong arm. These objects weren't just decor. They were protection, identity, and a way to say, yes, Thor's got my back. And if all else failed, you at least looked impressively fashionable while being smitten by fate. In Norse belief, gods weren't some distant, untouchable figures lounging on clouds. They were nosy, unpredictable neighbors who might show up at your dinner uninvited. People genuinely believed the gods could disguise themselves as travelers, beggars, or even the weird old guy yelling at goats. Offering hospitality wasn't just about being polite, it was divine insurance. If you were kind, maybe Odin would bless your crops. If you were rude, maybe Loki would prank your outhouse. Farmers left food at doorsteps, warriors made oaths under starlight, and every sneeze was a possible sign from the gods, or bad mead. The line between mortal and divine was as thin as a raven's feather. For the Norse, the gods weren't just in stories. They could be anywhere, watching, judging, or just awkwardly lurking. So next time someone strange knocks on your door, maybe offer them a horn of mead. Just in case. So what is Ragnarok? It's not a fancy music festival, nor a Viking-themed buffet. It's the ultimate apocalypse Norse edition, where gods, monsters, and cosmic fate all meet for the loudest, most chaotic showdown in mythology. Unlike other myths where the end is vague or metaphorical, the Norse went full spoiler mode. Everyone gets a doom appointment. Odin knows he'll be wolf food. Thor's gonna wrestle a sea serpent the size of a mountain and still lose. Loki? Oh, he's switching sides and bringing an army of zombies. It's not just a bad day. It's a cosmic meltdown with a pre-written script. Yet everyone still shows up, because in the Norse world, honor means facing your doom head-on, preferably with a giant axe. So buckle up. The end is nigh, and it's got a very dramatic soundtrack. Before the world ends with fiery dragons and angry gods, it starts with winter. But not just any winter, Fimbulwinter, the mother of all cold snaps. Imagine 3 years straight of blizzards, no sun, and neighbors fighting over the last piece of dried fish. Crops fail, families freeze, and even the toughest Viking starts Googling how to hibernate like a bear, if they had Wi-Fi. It's nature's brutal reset button, and a chilling sign that something very big and very bad is on the way. The gods? They see it coming but can't stop it. It's the prelude to Ragnarok. The cosmic version of, you thought that was bad? Hold my mead. So bundle up, stock your mead cellar, and maybe knit an extra scarf for your axe. It's going to be a very long winter. As if 3 years of Fimbulwinter weren't enough, the apocalypse checklist gets even more dramatic. First, the sun and moon? Gone, eaten by giant sky wolves like they're oversized cosmic snacks. Total blackout. Then Yggdrasil, the world tree that literally holds everything together, starts trembling like it just got some very bad news. Birds stop chirping, giants start pacing. Somewhere deep in the underworld, Hel, goddess of the dead, stretches after a long nap and goes, "Did I miss something?" These are not subtle signs. The universe is basically waving a huge red flag and yelling, "Brace yourselves!" And of course, mortals do what they do best in myths. Panic, pray, and sharpen their axes. The end isn't just coming, it's howling, rumbling, and possibly burping stars. In every epic tale, there's that one beast you really don't want to tick off. Enter Fenrir, the oversized wolf, born of mischief, betrayal, and maybe a little too much protein powder. The gods once tricked him into wearing a magical leash, but now, during Ragnarok, he breaks free like a furry wrecking ball with daddy issues. And who's brave, or foolish, enough to face him? None other than Odin, king of the gods, rocking his war helm and a stern no-fear attitude. The two clash in a battle of fangs and fury. Odin swings his spear. Fenrir chomps back with a snarl that says, "I skipped breakfast for this." Despite all his wisdom, Odin meets his doom inside Fenrir's gaping jaws. Because sometimes even the Allfather can't outrun a really hungry dog. It's brutal. It's tragic. It's very bitey. From the depths of the sea rises Jormungandr, the world serpent, Thor's arch nemesis, and possibly the worst sea monster to bring on a boat trip. His body is so massive it wraps around the earth like a scaly noodle with anger issues. As Ragnarok unfolds, he slithers out of the ocean, spewing poison like a vengeful dragon with acid reflux. Thor, the mighty thunder god, steps up, hammer in hand, beard glowing with electricity, and a face that says, "I've been waiting for this snake my whole life." The battle is earth-shaking, literally. Thunder cracks, venom flies, Mjolnir smashes into scales, and Jormungandr strikes back with fangs the size of longships. Thor finally delivers the killing blow, then takes 9 heroic steps before collapsing himself, poisoned to the end. A tie, the most epic, toxic, and dramatic tie in Norse history. As Ragnarok reaches peak chaos, Loki makes his grand entrance. Flaming sword? Check. Army of giants, undead warriors, and weird monsters? Double check. Looking smug as ever? Triple check. Across the Rainbow Bridge Bifrost stands Heimdall, the ever-vigilant guardian, blowing his magical horn Gjallarhorn like a cosmic air raid siren. The two longtime frenemies finally face off, Loki, the master of mischief, versus Heimdall, the most serious god in the room. Sparks fly, literally and metaphorically. Swords clash, insults are exchanged, and the bridge cracks beneath their feet. It's epic. It's tragic. It's also a bit petty. In the end, both fall, one laughing, the other grim to the last. The bridge shatters, the world shakes, and the gods' HR department quietly notes, "Recommend not hiring tricksters next time." In the fiery climax of Ragnarok, Freyr, the noble Vanir god of fertility and sunshine, marches into battle. Not with a sword, but with confidence. Yes, he once gave away his magical blade to impress a girl. Romantic? Absolutely. Smart? Not so much. Now he must face Surt, the fire giant of Muspelheim, who brings along a sword forged from cosmic inferno and enough flame to toast the whole cosmos. Freyr tries to hold his ground with a staghorn blade and determination worthy of a Viking drama. But Surt isn't impressed. Their clash is dramatic, with Freyr fighting bravely, dodging fireballs and swinging his humble weapon like a pro. But sadly, courage alone doesn't beat lava. Surt strikes the fatal blow, and Freyr falls, honorably, heroically, and perhaps still thinking, worth it for the date. Another tick on Ragnarok's doomsday checklist. And then, everything burned. Yggdrasil, the cosmic tree holding the 9 realms together, caught fire like a dry Christmas tree next to a lava lamp. Flames licked its branches, smoke blackened the skies, and the roots split as if someone had overwatered it with gasoline. Meanwhile, Surt's fiery army didn't just roast marshmallows, they roasted the entire planet. Oceans boiled, mountains crumbled like overbaked cookies, and the once majestic cities of gods sank beneath tsunamis. The sky? Gone. Just smoke, sparks, and the occasional screaming eagle on fire. No god, giant, elf, or dwarf was safe. It was like the universe's dramatic breakup scene, fiery, loud, and irreversible. But amid the chaos, a strange silence began to fall. As if the world, having had a full-blown tantrum, was finally ready to nap. From the ashes of the world, something stirred. While the gods and giants were busy self-destructing, 2 very lucky or very good at hiding humans, Leif and Lifthrasir, emerged from the roots of Yggdrasil. They'd been hiding in a hollow tree trunk, snacking on moss and praying no one sneezed too loud. Meanwhile, a few gods, yes, a small VIP list, managed to survive too. Baldur came back from the underworld, likely with a fresh glow-up, and reunited with Hödur, the guy who accidentally shot him. Oops. Together with other survivors, they looked at the scorched land, took a deep breath, and said, "All right, let's do this again." Birds chirped, rivers sparkled, and the air smelled only mildly of roasted mythology. The world, reborn, was theirs to rebuild, hopefully with fewer prophecies and less fire this time. And just like that, it wasn't really over. Ragnarok, for all its fiery chaos, wasn't a final goodbye. It was a cosmic refresh button. Think of it as the universe's dramatic way of saying, "Let's try that again, but with fewer giant serpents and more teamwork. The surviving gods gathered, a little scorched but wiser, and watched as the new world blossomed like a phoenix with a gardening hobby. Lif and Lif Thrasir, now official co-founders of Humanity 2.0, began building a new life, hopefully with a strict no-apocalypse policy. As birds sang and the sun rose again, the cycle of time hinted that this might not be the first or last Ragnarok. Because in Norse mythology, endings are just cleverly disguised beginnings with extra special effects. So yes, the world burned, but the story, it marches on, cape flowing dramatically in the wind. Before Thor got his hammer polished by Hollywood and Loki became a Tumblr heartthrob, Norse mythology lived in humble, poetic verses, namely the Eddas and Sagas. These ancient Icelandic texts weren't just bedtime stories for bored Vikings. Nope, they were packed with drama, betrayal, giants, and enough family feuds to fill several seasons of a soap opera. The poetic Edda gave us raw, haunting verses that probably made warriors weep into their mead, while the prose Edda tried to explain things with the calmness of a Viking librarian. And let's not forget the sagas, epic tales full of adventure, revenge, and people named Thorgils the Goat Puncher. Okay, maybe not that one, but close. These works were cultural hard drives, preserving the mindset, fears, and glory days of the Norse world long before comic book cameos were a thing. In the 19th century, while some folks were inventing steam engines and others were composing symphonies, a wave of romantic nationalism swept across Europe, and with it came a Viking comeback. Countries like Germany, Norway, and even Britain started digging through Old Norse myths like they were ancient superhero comics. Bearded gods and brooding sagas became cultural gold. Artists painted Valkyries flying through thunderclouds. Poets praised Odin's wisdom like it was a TED Talk, and composers gave Thor his own soundtrack. With extra timpani, of course. Suddenly, having Viking ancestry became trendy, like wearing a horned helmet to a history club. But make no mistake, this wasn't just cosplay. For many, Norse mythology became a way to express national pride, identity, and cultural uniqueness, with a dash of sword-swinging drama. Long before Peter Jackson's cameras rolled in New Zealand, a quiet English professor named J.R.R. Tolkien was already wandering through the misty mountains, in his mind. Tolkien, the father of Middle-earth, was a huge fanboy of Norse mythology. Elves, dwarves, dragons, runes, and even the idea of a mighty doomed world, all lovingly borrowed from the sagas of old Scandinavia. His languages? Inspired by Old Norse. His epic battles. Echoes of Ragnarok. Even Gandalf looks suspiciously like Odin on vacation. Tolkien didn't just copy-paste mythology, he stitched it together into a rich fantasy world that felt ancient, yet brand new. So next time you hear someone saying, "One ring to rule them all," remember? It all started with a guy who just really liked Icelandic literature and hated typewriters. Neil Gaiman didn't just read Norse myths. He invited them over for tea, gave them modern clothes, and asked them to tell their stories in a more sarcastic tone. His book Norse Mythology isn't your average dusty retelling. Instead, it's like sitting down with Odin at a bar while he grumbles about Loki again stealing something important. Gaiman manages to keep the grandeur of the myths while slipping in sly humor and snappy dialogue, making ancient gods feel oddly relatable. Thor isn't just a thunder god. He's the guy who smashes first and thinks later. Loki, still the Chaos King, but now with better comedic timing. Gaiman's storytelling is a masterclass in giving old tales a fresh haircut, without shaving off their epic beard. Thanks to his book, a whole new generation got hooked on Norse legends, without even needing a mead horn or a Viking beard comb. Thor with a hammer, Loki with mischief, and Odin with eye problems. These Norse gods are no longer confined to dusty sagas or runestones. Thanks to Marvel's cinematic universe, they've been upgraded to Hollywood stars with six-packs, glowing weapons, and surprisingly good hair. The films didn't just borrow names, they rebooted personalities. Thor became a lovable jock with a godly sense of humor. Loki transformed into everyone's favorite villain/anti-hero, with eyeliner sharper than his sarcasm. Odin, still wise, but now with majestic capes and Anthony Hopkins' gravitas. These modern portrayals may not be textbook mythology, but they brought Norse legends into living rooms across the globe. And let's face it, seeing Thor smash aliens while quoting Shakespeare is peak entertainment. Sure, scholars might raise eyebrows, but audiences raise box office charts. In the Marvelverse, Asgard may have fallen, but Norse myth soared to new heights, with popcorn in hand. If you ever wanted to see Kratos punch a Norse god in the face and survive to tell the tale, then welcome to God of War. This isn't your grandma's mythology class. This is blood, frost, fire, and feelings. In this modern reimagining, Kratos, a grumpy dad with anger issues and an axe that returns like a boomerang, stumbles into the world of Norse gods. What follows is a saga of epic boss fights, tragic father-son bonding, and enough snow to freeze a fire giant. The gods aren't smiling. They're scheming, brooding, and usually dying dramatically. Thor isn't a Marvel heartthrob here. He's a thunder-powered tank with a beer gut and a bad attitude. Odin? Think less wise king, more corporate villain in a cloak. The game dives deep into Norse lore, twisting myths into a gritty drama that somehow still finds room for heart. Who knew smashing undead Draugr could be emotional? If there's a game where you can raid a monastery before breakfast and debate Norse cosmology by lunch, it's Assassin's Creed, Valhalla. Players step into the boots of Eivor, a Viking warrior with perfect braids, questionable morals, and a fondness for axes and philosophy. As you pillage your way across Anglo-Saxon England, the game doesn't just serve action, it delivers myth. Odin whispers in your dreams, Loki pops up with that smug grin, and suddenly you're in Asgard talking to Thor about destiny. The line between reality and legend is so blurry you might forget if you're chasing a Templar or a prophecy. With detailed world building, glowing runes, longboats, and enough beards to start a lumberjack convention, Valhalla turns Norse mythology into a living, breathing, and stabbing universe. And honestly, who knew berserkers could be this poetic? You might not swing a hammer like Thor, but if you've ever questioned your fate while sipping overpriced coffee, congratulations, you're dabbling in Norse philosophy. The ancient Norse obsession with fate, or word, wasn't just for dramatic storytelling. It was existential fuel. Life was a tangled web spun by the Norns, and even Odin couldn't cheat the system. Fast forward to now, and these ideas sneak into our daily lives more than we realize. That job you didn't get? Fate. The cat that ignored you? Also fate. Alongside this came the fierce code of honor, where a Viking's word meant more than a legal contract, and dying with glory was better than living quietly with oat milk. These ideas echo in everything from war movies to motivational quotes on social media. So next time you're torn between salad or pizza, just ask, what would a Viking do? Spoiler, probably pillage the salad bar. Looking for a vacation that's part sightseeing, part saga reenactment? Scandinavia's got you covered. Fans of Norse mythology flock to Sweden's ancient Uppsala temple site, where sacrifices once kept the gods entertained, or so the tour guides say. Then there's Norway's Viking Ship Museum, where longboats rest like retired rock stars, famous, glorious, and slightly dusty. Over in Iceland, sagas practically grow on trees, with storytellers ready to narrate heroic battles while you sip fermented shark juice. Even modern cafes get in on the action. Don't be surprised if your barista is dressed like a shield maiden, or if the coffee is named Mjolnir Macchiato. The region has turned its mythological past into a tourist gold mine. And who can blame them? Between runestones, mead tastings, and Odin-themed escape rooms, even skeptics end up believing a little. Just remember, selfies with statues of Thor are mandatory. And no, yelling Valhalla from a fjord cliff doesn't summon real Valkyries. We checked. Not everything from Norse mythology aged like fine mead. While gods, warriors, and epic tales found fame in books and movies, some darker interpretations took a less heroic path. In recent decades, extremist groups have cherry-picked runes, Viking symbols, and even Odin himself to build ideologies that have nothing to do with the original myths. Suddenly, Thor's hammer becomes a hate symbol, and Loki is used to justify rebellion. Though, to be fair, he was good at that. The danger lies in how these groups twist mythology into propaganda. ignoring the rich cultural, poetic, and philosophical roots of the Norse tradition. Scholars, museums, and even Marvel fans now step in to clarify what's myth, what's Marvel, and what's just modern nonsense. So while you're free to cosplay as a Viking and yell "Skull" over your horn of ale, it's also worth remembering. With great mythology comes great responsibility. Odin didn't fight for hashtags. In the dusty tomes of Norse mythology, Odin is far from your cuddly cinematic father figure. He's a one-eyed wanderer cloaked in mystery, who traded his own eye for wisdom and hung himself on Yggdrasil to learn the runes. Hardcore, right? But on the big screen, Odin often becomes the Norse version of a wise, grumpy grandpa, equal parts Shakespearean monarch and motivational speaker. Instead of dark sacrifices and cryptic poetry, we get lectures about responsibility and Asgardian politics. It's like replacing Gandalf the Grey with Dumbledore on Casual Friday. The original Odin is complex, cold, and often morally gray, a god who seeks knowledge at any cost and occasionally lets chaos unfold if it serves his grand design. But movies love clarity. So the terrifying trickster mentor becomes a dad who scolds Thor, forgives Loki, and dies with dramatic lighting. Which is fine. Just don't expect the Odin of the Eddas to hand out hugs or family therapy. He's more likely to disappear into a thunderstorm muttering riddles. In the ancient sagas, Thor is less of a charming himbo and more of an overpowered musclehead with a short fuse. He's the guy who solves problems by smashing first, asking questions never. With a mighty hammer, red beard, and a diet consisting mainly of goats and beer, he was the Viking embodiment of brute strength and stormy wrath. Wit? Not exactly his department. But in the movies, Thor has evolved, or been reinvented, into a lovable, slightly clueless jock with perfect abs and a sense of humor. He cracks jokes, learns life lessons, and sometimes even cries in slow motion. Gone is the thunderous rage of myth. In its place, we get superhero charm, dramatic arcs, and the occasional romantic subplot. That's not necessarily bad. It just means our thunder god swapped his berserker spirit for a gym membership and a script coach. Somewhere, the old Thor is probably grumbling, "Back in my day, we threw hammers, not punchlines." In the original Norse myths, Loki is the ultimate wild card, a shape-shifting troublemaker who sometimes saves the gods and other times ruins their day, all while flashing a mischievous grin. He's chaotic neutral with a PhD in betrayal, comedy, and unpredictable alliances. He fathered monsters, tricked giants, and once turned into a mare just to distract someone. Yes, really. But in modern films, Loki got a glow-up. He's no longer just a cosmic rascal. He's a misunderstood anti-hero with cheekbones sharp enough to slice through Asgardian armor. Movie Loki broods, redeems himself, and occasionally cries while looking longingly into space. Fans love him for his charisma and complexity, but the old-school Loki? He'd probably roll his eyes and say, "Since when do I need a redemption arc? I'm here to start chaos, not a fan club." Heimdall in Norse mythology is a radiant, pale-skinned god with ears so sharp he can hear grass growing and eyes that see to the end of the world. He's the silent guardian of the Rainbow Bridge Bifrost, always alert, never off duty, and probably terrible at parties. But in modern films, Heimdall got a full cinematic makeover. Goodbye, pale Viking. Hello, Idris Elba in golden armor. Movie Heimdall is stoic, regal, and cooler than a frost giant with sunglasses. The change sparked debate. Was it too far from the myth? Or just a modern remix? Either way, original Heimdall is likely watching from Asgard, squinting with his supervision, muttering, "Well, at least they got the sword right." In Norse mythology, Hela is no daddy's girl. She's the daughter of Loki, yes, rather that Loki, and rules over Helheim, the gloomy underworld for those who didn't die a heroic death. Picture a grim, majestic figure with half her face pale like a ghost and the other half dark like a shadow, basically a goth queen with a death stare. But when she made her movie debut, surprise, Hela is now Odin's long-lost daughter, banished for being too ambitious. The film version, played by a fabulous Cate Blanchett, is a slick, all-black, leather-wearing, antler-helmet-rocking villainess who slashes through armies while tossing sass like confetti. The transformation from underworld ruler to Asgardian drama queen definitely makes for great cinema. But the original Hela might be somewhere in Helheim, rolling her eyes under that half-dead face. Valhalla in Norse mythology isn't some fluffy heaven with harps and clouds. Nope. It's more like a hardcore warrior boot camp. Warriors who died bravely in battle get picked by Valkyries and brought to this grand, mead-soaked hall in Asgard. But instead of eternal rest, these fallen heroes train non-stop, fighting each other daily, healing up by dinner, and repeating the whole thing again. All this to get ready for Ragnarok, the final battle. Now in movies, Valhalla often gets the spa treatment. Bathed in golden light, full of serenity and slow-motion reunions. It's portrayed like the VIP lounge for dead Norse people. Not wrong, just way less sweaty. While the cinematic Valhalla feels like a retirement home with better lighting, the original version is more like a gym membership you can't cancel, even after death. Now, here's a mystery worthy of the gods themselves. Where on earth is Freya in modern movies? In Norse mythology, she's not just some minor goddess. Freya is a powerhouse, a fierce warrior, a master of satyr, magic, and basically the queen of drama, love, death, and cats. She rides a chariot pulled by two giant felines, cries golden tears, and gets half of the fallen warriors before Odin does. But in films, she's almost entirely erased, as if some screenwriter had a personal vendetta against strong, magical women in armor. Instead, her spotlight seems to have been redistributed among more familiar faces like Thor and Loki. It's like inviting Beyoncé to a concert and then asking her to sit in the audience. The omission of Freya isn't just a missed opportunity. It's cinematic blasphemy. Seriously, who wouldn't want to see a cat chariot driving, tear gold crying, magic-wielding goddess on screen? Let's talk about the world's biggest no-show in modern Norse-inspired films, Jormungandr, the gigantic sea serpent that encircles Midgard. In the original myths, he's not just a big snake, he's the snake. So massive he wraps around the world and bites his own tail like he's trying to invent the ultimate yoga pose. He's destined to battle Thor at Ragnarok in an epic showdown where both die. Yes, even the superhero. But in most movies, nothing, nada, zero snake. Hollywood seems to have looked at this awe-inspiring apocalypse noodle and said, meh, too weird, let's add another Loki scene instead. Imagine skipping Godzilla in a monster movie. That's what ignoring Jormungandr feels like. It's a tragedy, and not the poetic kind. Maybe filmmakers just didn't have enough CGI budget for 10,000 miles of scaly doom, or maybe they're saving him for a sequel called Thor vs. Snake, Midgard Drift. One can dream. Ragnarok. In Norse mythology, it's the ultimate apocalypse, the final battle where gods fall, the world burns, and even Thor doesn't make it out alive. It's not a cheerful tale. It's a brutal, tragic, poetic ending that brings everything to a full, fated circle. Now, enter Hollywood. Suddenly, Ragnarok is a fun action-adventure with jokes, explosions, and a Led Zeppelin soundtrack. Thor cracks one-liners, while Asgard explodes behind him like it's just Tuesday. In the myths, Ragnarok is the end. No sequel, no after-credits scene. But in movies, it's more like spring cleaning. Oops, Asgard's gone. Let's find a new place. The film version turns cosmic annihilation into a buddy comedy road trip. It's entertaining, sure, but it's about as faithful to the source material as calling a volcano a heated spa. Still, credit where it's due. At least they kept the name. Even if the original Ragnarok would have had the popcorn choking in existential dread. In Norse mythology, the Valkyries were not exactly your friendly neighborhood warriors. These fierce maidens of Odin had one job: swoop down onto battlefields, choose who lived, who died, and who got a VIP ticket to Valhalla. Think less female empowerment icon and more grim-faced soul collectors with terrifying winged horses. But then came the movies. Suddenly, Valkyries are cool, modern, motorcycle-riding heroines in sleek armor, striking heroic poses under glowing skies. They went from supernatural battlefield reapers to feminist poster girls. Not a bad transformation, but certainly cinematic. While the original Valkyries inspired awe and maybe just a bit of fear, the movie versions inspire cosplay and Instagram filters. In short, Hollywood traded the eerie mysticism for epic girl power, and we're not complaining. Just don't forget, the originals were more likely to give you a chilling stare than a motivational speech. In the original Norse myths, the gods of Asgard were not exactly the cuddly, chatty types. They were aloof, flawed, and bound by fate. Odin didn't give fatherly advice over tea, and Thor wouldn't cry watching a sunset. These deities operated in a world governed by grim prophecy and cosmic inevitability. But then Hollywood came along and thought, hey, what if Thor had a great sense of humor? Suddenly the gods are cracking jokes, having emotional breakthroughs, and learning life lessons in under 2 hours. It's like turning a grim Norse saga into a holiday family movie. Sure, audiences relate more to gods who cry, hug, and have trust issues. But let's not forget that in the old stories, even gods couldn't escape destiny. And most of them didn't even try. So while the cinematic Aesir might feel more human, the mythical Aesir were a divine lesson in embracing doom with style. In the original Norse mythology, the 9 realms weren't exactly vacation spots. Everything was cold, dark, mysterious, and filled with giant wolves or serpents waiting to ruin your day. The gods weren't smiling superheroes. They were grim, burdened by fate, and surrounded by tragedy. Fast forward to modern films, and suddenly the end of the world has neon lights, punchlines, and background music by Led Zeppelin. The gritty realism of frost giants and existential dread has been replaced by slow-motion action shots and feel-good moments. It's as if someone looked at a Viking funeral and said, "Needs more glitter." But the truth is, myth was never meant to be cheerful. It was meant to prepare people for a harsh world. The original tales taught courage in the face of doom, not how to deliver a witty one-liner during an apocalypse. Still, maybe a little humor makes the bitterness easier to swallow. In Norse mythology, the relationships among gods like Odin, Loki, and Thor are not a cozy family sitcom. Odin is the distant, all-seeing patriarch. Loki is the chaotic wild card who sometimes helps but often ruins everything. And Thor is a grumpy powerhouse who solves most problems with a hammer, not hugs. Their dynamics are layered, tragic, and sometimes downright toxic. But in films? Welcome to Asgard Family TV. Suddenly, Odin is the wise but loving dad, Loki is the misunderstood adopted brother with eyeliner, and Thor is the charming goofball who's basically a thunder-powered Labrador. The original depth and tension are smoothed over in favor of relatable drama and sibling banter. It's not that the movie versions are bad, it's just that they've been repackaged for a modern audience who prefer therapy scenes over apocalyptic betrayals. And let's be honest, sometimes it's easier to deal with a mischievous god when he's making jokes instead of birthing monsters. One of the biggest losses in modern film adaptations of Norse mythology? The deep philosophical themes. In the original tales, fate isn't just a vague idea. It's a cosmic law written by the Norns, and even the gods can't escape it. Death isn't something to fear. It's inevitable, meaningful, sometimes glorious. And rebirth? It's a cycle woven into the end of Ragnarok. But movies? Nah, too deep. Let's swap those existential questions for more explosions and one-liners. In films, the gods don't worry about fate. They just worry about who's holding the magic hammer next. The philosophical richness gets flattened like a pancake under Thor's hammer. Instead of pondering mortality or the meaning of sacrifice, our beloved deities are busy with space travel, jokes, and superhero poses. It's entertaining, sure, but if Odin gave his eye for wisdom, movie Odin probably gave it for better Wi-Fi. Among all the things lost in Hollywood's interpretation of Norse mythology, symbolic elements take one of the hardest hits. Take Yggdrasil, the mighty world tree that connects all realms. In the original tales, it's a cosmic backbone, linking gods, humans, giants, and the dead. In films, it might get a fancy CGI shot for 10 seconds, then vanish like Loki after a prank. And what about the Norns, the trio of fate-weaving ladies who literally determine the destiny of gods and men? They're often cut entirely or show up like background extras in a Viking soap opera. The problem is symbols require thinking. And let's face it, who wants deep symbolism when you can have flying hammers and laser eyes? But without Yggdrasil, the myth loses its spine. Without the Norns, fate becomes just another plot twist. It's like cutting out the roots of a tree and wondering why it won't stand upright. Films may be flashy, but the symbols, those ancient metaphors, are what made Norse mythology powerful in the first place. Somewhere between the Nine Realms and Hollywood, something strange happened. Norse gods got rebranded as aliens. Yes, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Odin and crew aren't divine beings anymore. They're advanced extraterrestrials, with a flair for capes and magic science. It's as if someone asked, "How can we explain magic without sounding too mystical?" And someone else answered, "Aliens, duh." While this makes for cool spaceships and interdimensional portals, it strips away the spiritual and symbolic essence of Norse mythology. Odin is no longer a shamanic figure of sacrifice and knowledge. He's now a galactic emperor with good Wi-Fi. And Asgard? Less sacred city, more futuristic theme park. The gods weren't meant to be aliens. They were metaphors for nature, fate, and human struggle. Turning them into superpowered space tourists may sell tickets, but it also turns centuries of myth into cosmic cosplay. If Thor ever fights Thanos at a drive-through burger joint, we'll know the transformation is complete. In Norse mythology, love and jealousy among the gods were less romantic drama and more cosmic catastrophe. Freya's tears turned into gold. Loki shapeshifted into a mare just to mess with everyone. And Odin, well, Odin basically watched it all with one eye and a philosophical sigh. These divine emotions weren't just for show, they were metaphors for power struggles, existential questions, and the chaos of fate. Fast forward to modern films, and suddenly the gods are entangled in love triangles that feel like deleted scenes from a teen romance. Thor pines, Loki flirts, and Hela gets sidelined, like an ex who showed up uninvited. The raw emotional tension of ancient myths becomes smooth, safe, and digestible for popcorn munchers. Yes, it's fun, yes, it's charming, but we've traded tragic depth for romantic comedy. Ancient gods didn't just get jealous, they waged wars over it. In today's films, they mostly just get awkward silences and background music. Somewhere, Freya is rolling her eyes, assuming she's even been invited to the scene. When it comes to Norse mythology and popular media, some works take a darker detour. Enter God of War, the video game that grabbed the myths, gave them a protein shake, and threw them into a blender of rage, grief, and cinematic slow-motion punches. Unlike the sparkly hammers and comic relief brothers in blockbuster movies, this version doesn't shy away from tragedy. Gods die. Children cry. And Odin? Let's just say he's less wise grandfather and more corporate overlord in a god costume. Kratos, with his eternal frown and emotionally scarred son, drags us through a version of Norse myth closer in spirit to the original texts. Brutal, somber, and drenched in symbolism. Sure, there's still epic combat and flaming swords, but there's also philosophical reflection, questions about fate, and a healthy dose of regret. It's a reminder that not all myth adaptations are bubble-wrapped for fun. Some go back to the roots covered in blood, frost, and existential dread. And somehow, that makes it feel more authentic. Just don't expect a dance number. Let's be real. No movie has ever gotten Norse mythology 100% right. Some come close, others just freestyle it. Modern adaptations pick and choose what suits the audience. A bit of action here, some romance there, a sprinkle of witty one-liners. And suddenly, Thor's smashing beer mugs while cracking jokes, Odin's giving TED Talks about leadership, and Loki's more of a misunderstood heartthrob than a divine trickster. But can we blame them? These myths were never meant for the big screen. They were brutal, symbolic, and layered like an onion made of frost and existential dread. Filmmakers often toss the heavy stuff aside and go straight for the flashiest parts. It's not evil, it's marketing. After all, you can't sell popcorn with prophecies about the end of the world unless there's a laser-eyed dragon involved. So while no single version is accurate, each reflects the era that created it. And maybe that's the real magic. Norse myths survive not by staying the same, but by shape-shifting, much like Loki himself. And so we arrive at the end of our journey. From Odin's cryptic wisdom to Thor's hammer-wielding antics, from ancient scrolls to billion-dollar blockbusters. Norse mythology has come a long way, leaping from smoky mead halls into Dolby surround sound. But here's the truth bomb. No movie adaptation can ever truly replace the original myths. Films can entertain, simplify, modernize, but they can't capture the raw grit, spiritual depth, and symbolic density of the old tales. They're like fast food versions of a centuries-old feast, tasty but missing the ancestral spices. Books and scholarly texts may not have explosions or CGI dragons, but they hold the real soul of the North. So next time you see Thor toss a truck or Loki flash that mischievous grin, remember, there's more beneath the surface, a darker, richer world waiting in the sagas. Lights, camera, mythology, but don't forget the library. Unlike modern religions or fantasy franchises with carefully curated timelines, Norse mythology is a glorious mess. No, seriously. It's like ancient fan fiction where everyone forgot to check canon. One village swears Loki is the father of monsters. Another says he's just the god of bad decisions. Some sagas paint Thor as a grumpy tank. Others as a sensitive soul with anger issues. Why? Because these stories were passed down orally for centuries. There was no official wiki, no central editorial board of Viking lore. Each skald, Norse storyteller, added flair, adjusted details, or completely reimagined events to fit their audience, like a stand-up comedian tailoring jokes to the crowd. This lack of standardization makes Norse myth maddening for scholars, but delightfully chaotic for everyone else. And honestly, that's what gives it soul. The myths weren't meant to be frozen in stone. They were meant to be alive, shifting with each retelling, like the northern lights dancing across the sky. When it comes to Norse mythology, the ultimate cheat codes are two dusty old books, the Elder Edda and the Younger Edda. Think of them as the Viking version of a cinematic universe guidebook, except instead of character arcs and plot twists, you get cryptic poems and battle songs written in Old Norse that make even Shakespeare sound like a comic strip. The Elder Edda, also called the Poetic Edda, is a collection of anonymous poems brimming with gods, monsters, doom, and more doom. Meanwhile, the Younger Edda, penned by Snorri Sturluson, is basically the For Dummies version, explaining the myths in prose, probably for confused medieval readers who just wanted to know why Thor kept smashing giants. Despite their names, the Younger Edda isn't a sequel. It's more like a reboot. And while these two texts are the main gateways into Norse lore, even they don't always agree. One minute Odin is all-knowing, the next he's lost in philosophical riddles. But hey, welcome to Norse mythology, where consistency is optional, but epic drama is guaranteed. Meet Snorri Sturluson, part historian, part poet, part Viking fanboy. In the 13th century, this Icelandic legend took it upon himself to do what no berserker had done before, organize Norse mythology like a proper librarian. Armed with ink, ambition, and a dramatic beard, Snorri penned the Prose Edda, essentially giving confused readers a user manual to the Norse cosmos. Without him, Odin might still be that mysterious one-eyed guy in a cloak muttering riddles at the bar. Instead, thanks to Snorri's storytelling chops, we get full-blown narratives, complete with divine family feuds, wolf children, and apocalyptic doom. Of course, Snorri had his own agenda. He lived in Christian Iceland, so he dressed the myths with a sprinkle of theology, a dash of medieval flair, and just enough structure to impress fellow scholars. Was he accurate? Not always. But was he entertaining? Absolutely. And let's be honest, if Norse myths were a band, Snorri was the guy who recorded their greatest hits album, and added a few solos of his own. If you think Norse mythology is all about Odin, Thor, and Loki, think again. There's a whole lineup of lesser-known characters who didn't get their Marvel debut. Yet, take Skadi, the goddess of skiing and vengeance. She chose her husband by looking at his feet, don't ask, and lives in the mountains because, why not? Or Hirakan, a giantess so strong she launched Baldur's funeral ship with one shove, while riding a wolf and using vipers as reins. You can't make this up, except someone clearly did. Then there are Loki's other kids, besides the famous wolf Fenrir and serpent Jörmungandr. Ever heard of Hel, his daughter who rules the underworld with all the teen angst of a goth queen? Or Sleipnir, Loki's eight-legged horse son. Long story, don't Google it, work. These side characters may not be household names, but they add spice, weirdness, and pure Norse chaos to the mythos. Honestly, they deserve their own spin-off series, preferably animated and rated "What did I just watch?" Here's a wild idea. What if Thor, Zeus, and Indra all went to the same godly gym? Because honestly, the similarities between Norse, Greek, Hindu, and even Slavic mythology are uncanny. You've got thunder gods with big tempers and even bigger weapons, wise old sky fathers with long beards, and serpents large enough to wrap around the world. Classic myth move. It's like ancient cultures were running the same myth-making software with different skins. Loki and Hermes, both tricksters. Ragnarok and the Greek Titanomachy. End-of-the-world brawls with family drama, even the cycle of death and rebirth. Hinduism and Norse myths nod in agreement. Maybe it's because ancient humans all wrestled with the same cosmic questions. Where do we come from? Why is the weather so dramatic? And how do we blame it on gods with style? These parallels aren't proof of plagiarism, just proof that human imagination, across continents, loves a good thunderbolt, a clever liar, and an apocalyptic prophecy or two. Oral tradition, the ancient world's Wi-Fi, but without a password and with a lot more lag. Norse mythology, like many ancient stories, traveled by word of mouth, literally. That means your tale of brave Thor slaying giants could slowly turn into Thor baking bread if the storyteller forgot their lines. Each time someone retold a myth, they added flair, skipped boring bits, or mixed in local gossip. Over centuries, this game of mythological telephone created variations as wild as Loki's mood swings. In one village, a god might be a hero. In the next, a glorified pest. This makes oral tradition a double-edged sword. It kept stories alive long before books, but it also warped them in the process. Think of it like making photocopies of photocopies. Eventually, the original face gets smudged. Still, without these oral storytellers, grannies, bards, and slightly tipsy uncles at feasts, Norse myths might have faded away. So next time you misremember a story, congrats. You're continuing a proud Viking tradition. Just when we thought we'd uncovered all Viking secrets, along comes another runestone or burial ship saying, "Surprise!" Archaeologists digging through Scandinavian soil often stumble upon treasures that sound like they came straight from a fantasy novel. Sacrificial swords, ships filled with bones, or runes etched with cryptic messages. One minute you're planting potatoes, the next you're holding a 1,000-year-old axe. These discoveries aren't just cool Instagram content, they're crucial pieces of the Norse puzzle. Each runestone or ceremonial object adds another missing piece to the chaotic and magical world of Odin and friends. And sometimes these findings challenge everything we thought we knew. Like maybe Loki wasn't just a troublemaker. Maybe he also paid taxes. Okay, maybe not. Bottom line, the Earth of the North still whispers its stories. We just need to keep digging and maybe bring a brush. And a lot of patience. In modern times, the Viking spirit refuses to stay buried under moss and museum dust. Across the globe, enthusiastic reenactors don hornless helmets, thankfully, and leather tunics to resurrect ancient rituals in full dramatic flair. Whether it's a midwinter blot with candles and chanting, or a battle reenactment that's one axe swing away from a pulled hamstring, these events attract history buffs and curious onlookers alike. Some participants take things very seriously, memorizing Old Norse prayers, brewing authentic mead, and even arguing over how angry Odin would be if someone wore polyester. These revival groups don't just cosplay, they create living laboratories of Norse cosmology. From Sweden's frostbitten forests to small-town fairs in America, these rituals help us peek into a mindset where gods weren't just worshipped, they were feared, negotiated with, and sometimes trolled, Loki style. It's a wild, smoky, goosebump-inducing bridge between past and present. Norse mythology isn't just for warriors in horn-free helmets or fantasy game developers, it's sneaking into classrooms too. Across Europe and beyond, schools are cracking open ancient sagas to explore themes like honor, fate, and moral gray zones. Loki, we're looking at you. Students debate whether Thor's hammering solves anything, or if Odin's sacrifice really counts as wisdom. Universities even offer whole courses dissecting Norse cosmology, Viking ethics, and how Fenrir the Wolf would fare in modern literature. Museums turn mythology into hands-on experience, where kids can write fake rune messages, or try not to giggle at Loki's shape-shifting antics. It turns out these age-old tales are excellent tools to explore ethics, gender, politics, and storytelling itself. In short, Norse myths are no longer just legends. They're teaching moments with drama, depth, and the occasional giant squirrel. Even though the Vikings have long vanished from the fjords, their myths still echo in ways Thor's hammer never could. From Hollywood blockbusters to tattoo parlors, from motivational quotes to battle reenactments, the values of Norse mythology sneak into our daily lives like Loki on a stealth mission. Honor, courage, and accepting one's fate are no longer just concepts for warriors in bearskin capes. They're now slogans on gym walls and team-building retreats. People still talk about Ragnarok like it's the original, spoiler alert. Odin's all-seeing eye sounds suspiciously like your smartphone's algorithm. And the great tree Yggdrasil? It might as well be the internet, complex, tangled, and full of squirrels. While the gods may be sleeping in Valhalla, their legacy is wide awake, living, breathing, and occasionally meme-worthy.